Honey, did you hear about what's going on in church? When I tell you, the church is full of demons. Just hypocrites, I'd say. Honey, you got to watch this video I came across, talk about one of the favorite pastors or the favorite, I believe he's a gospel singer. Somebody very important in the church that you guys love. And he ain't been living right, y'all. So I want you guys to watch this video. Let's react to it. I've been hearing it's getting some buzz, and I know you guys will probably appreciate this. Exposing these hypocrites, demons out here in the church, honey. Okay, honey, let's watch it. Let's react, comment, like, and share, and let's see what you guys think about this.
He shall, won't you say, and there's no looking back. I won't complain. My bright and morning star.
I don't want to play the blame game, because he could say, oh, you cheated, and I could say, oh, he cheated, and who did what, or who did first, or who did that. All I say is that in marriages, all kind of things happen in your marriage. At the end of the day, you have to forgive and keep it moving. There are things that were said that he put out there on social media, and it's no secret, and I have no problem talking about it now. And the reason why I didn't at that time, when people don't understand that when you're going through a divorce and you're going through something like that, it's not easy. Different. I'm saying for a woman to be like, you struggle with having children, not being able to carry children full term, and then here it is, your husband goes out and gets someone else pregnant, and for me that was just the dagger, that was the nail in the coffin.
Can you imagine building a gospel career with your own two hands, pouring 15 years of your life into a marriage and a ministry and a man, standing beside him when the cameras came, co-pastoring his father's church, writing songs on his albums, directing his choir, and then watching him leave 2 days after you buried your mother, only to find out 5 months later that someone else was pregnant? Damita Haddon did not just survive one of the most publicly dissected divorces in gospel music history. She survived it in silence. She took the stones, absorbed the social media ridicule, lost her mother, lost her marriage, and lost her standing in a community that had already made up its mind, all while the man at the center of the story was telling his version of it on national television. And then she rebuilt. This is the story of Damita Haddon. Damita Dawn Bass was born on September 4th, 1971 in Lincoln Park, a township of Detroit, Michigan. Her father was Reverend Walter Bass, and her mother was Minister Ruby Bass, two ministers raising a daughter in a home where music and faith were not separate things. They were the same thing. Damita was born with an identical twin sister, Margarita.
Margarita's the oldest, 1 minute, by 1 minute.
By 1 minute.
Yeah.
Identical.
Identical. So if she came in here now just like me and I walked out the room, you would know the difference.
And the two of them grew up inside the same Detroit gospel ecosystem that produced the Winans, the Clark sisters, and Fred Hammond.
That I was trained and mentored by a lot of them. I was able to sing in the Michigan State Choir up under the direction of Dr. Maddie Moss Clark when she was alive. She threw bags of peanuts.
The city did not manufacture musicians by accident. It produced them because the church demanded it. And the church in Detroit demanded nothing less than everything you had. Damita had a voice. She always had a voice. The question was only ever what she was going to do with it. As teenagers, Damita and Margarita formed a female a cappella group they named Adoration and Praise.
Yeah, early 90s. Really, we started from teenagers before we graduated out of high school, Adoration and Praise. We would just sing in local churches in the city, all over the city.
The name was both a statement and a declaration of intent. The group was invited to perform at a birthday party in Indiana for a record executive. And what happened next was the way things happened in gospel before the internet made everything instantaneous. Someone in the room heard something they could not ignore and made a decision on the spot. TM Records, a gospel label run by Tim and Tanya Harris out of Indianapolis, signed them. In 1991, Damita made her professional entrance into the gospel industry with the group's debut record, Time Is Running Out.
Friends are becoming few.
Produced by longtime friend Aaron Lindsay and Alan Abraham, the album received multiple Stellar Award nominations. The single, He's Wonderful, written and arranged by Damita herself, caught the ear of Donald Lawrence, one of the most respected producers in gospel music. He liked it enough to record it himself under the title Great Things on his 1995 live project Bible Stories, released on Detroit-based label Crystal Rose. That was the caliber of what Damita was writing at the beginning of her career, songs good enough that Donald Lawrence wanted them for himself. It was through her ministry in Detroit that Damita's path converged with the Haddon family. She became the assistant minister of music at Unity Cathedral of Faith Church, the church founded and led by Bishop Clarence B. Haddon and prophetess Joyce R. Haddon, the parents of a young singer and preacher named Deitrick Von Haddon. Working beside Deitrick in that ministry, Damita did what she always did. She served, she sang, she co-wrote, she arranged, she directed the choir. Her vocal signature became a cornerstone of the early Deitrick Haddon and Voices of Unity sound, present on every project they recorded. 3 months after the Come Into This House album was recorded by Tycott Records in early 1996, Damita and Deitrick were married on June 29, 1996. She was 24 years old. He was 22. They were standing inside a ministry, inside a family, inside a church world that viewed marriage as both a personal covenant and a public testament. The weight of the symbol was built in from the beginning. For the next several years, Damita was everywhere in Deitrick's ascent, without always being seen. Her lead and background vocals appeared on every Voices of Unity project. Her writing and production contributions shaped the sound of a choir that was winning Gospel Music Workshop of America awards and attracting national attention. Live the Life in 1997 earned Excellence Awards for New Artist of the Year in Urban Contemporary and Album of the Year in Urban Contemporary. Chainbreaker in 1999 broke them nationally. Supernatural followed, and through all of it, Damita was in the room, behind the microphone, beside her husband, doing the work that made the work possible. The industry knew her name, the church knew her voice, but the spotlight she deserved as a solo artist had not yet arrived. That changed in 2000 when Atlantic Records discovered her. The group was performing in Nashville at an industry function, and the people from Atlantic heard what those first executives in Indiana had heard nearly a decade earlier. Something that stopped you in the middle of what you were doing. She was signed. Her first solo project, simply titled Damita, was released in 2000, produced by R&B producer Noontime, rock artist Jem Ed Norman from the Eagles, and legendary arranger Arif Mardin, a production team whose range alone announced that the label understood what kind of artists they were dealing with. The album positioned her as a solo force, distinct from the Voices of Unity chapter, a woman with her own sound and her own ministry. The gospel industry took note. Meanwhile, the new hymns live from the Motor City project in 2000,
I want you to hear.
featured a chorus of more than 300 Detroit singers, an enormous production that she helped shape and whose live performances were released as a film. She was operating simultaneously as a solo artist, a ministry collaborator, a co-laborer in her husband's vision, and an architect of gospel productions that the city of Detroit would remember for years. The scale of what she was carrying was not small, and none of it was given to her. Every note of it was earned. In 2002, Deitrick's breakthrough album Lost and Found arrived on Verity and Tycott, and Sinner's Prayer became a gospel crossover phenomenon.
Sinner's prayer. Hope y'all don't mind.
Damita was in the fabric of his rise, even as he stepped further into the solo spotlight. Their partnership, personal and professional, was the engine of a ministry that was expanding far beyond the west side of Detroit. In 2008, Damita's second solo album, No Looking Back, arrived on Tycott Records. The title was directional. It was a statement about movement, about faith, about refusing to dwell on what was behind. She could not have known when she named that album that the most important test of that philosophy was still coming. In 2009, Deitrick and Damita relocated from Detroit to Los Angeles. They had co-pastored Kingdom Culture Church on the west side of Detroit, the church his father had founded, for 2.5 years. Now they were stepping into a new city, a new chapter, a new phase of ministry. The outward appearance was one of unified purpose, two leaders moving in the same direction. foundation. But the marriage was under pressures that had not been fully resolved, and the move to Los Angeles did not reset whatever had been quietly accumulating. Then 2011 arrived, and it brought the kind of pain that arrives in layers, each one heavier than the last. Damita's mother died suddenly of a massive heart attack. The woman who had been her first audience, her first ministry, her first confirmation that the voice she carried meant something, gone without warning. For any child, that loss is incomprehensible. For Damita, it arrived during a marriage that she would later describe as having been in crisis, a crisis she believed they had resolved. In December of 2011, the pregnancy was confirmed. Deitrick had fathered a child with a woman named Dominique McTeer. Damita has said she was not surprised when she learned about it, that her intuition had already told her that something like this was true the moment he abruptly departed. But knowing something and having it confirmed are two different kinds of devastation. The divorce was finalized in 2011. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of co-ministry, 15 years of her voice in his music and her hands in his vision dissolved. Then Deitrick went further. In early 2013, he took to Facebook and named a name. He accused gospel artist Isaac Carree of having had an affair with Damita, claiming it was the real reason the marriage had failed, and framing himself as a man who had been wronged. He titled the post, "Coming Clean" in 2013, so God can really be truly glorified. Isaac Carree responded with a statement saying he and his wife were shocked and confused, that he and Deitrick had spoken openly about the matter long before the public accusation, and that while he refused to drag private conversations into a public forum, both of them knew what the truth was. He offered Deitrick his prayers and ended his statement. The social media storm that followed was enormous, and still Damita said nothing. She watched Preachers of LA begin airing on Oxygen in October 2013, with Deitrick as one of the featured cast members presenting his version of the marriage collapse to a primetime cable audience. She has said she watched 2 episodes before her attorneys advised her to stop. She let the attorneys watch the rest to determine whether any legal response was necessary. She described what she saw in those 2 episodes as television, constructed for ratings, not reality. She said flatly that TV was never full reality and that they made things up to make it juicy. It was the most measured possible response to watching your personal life become someone else's storyline. Then, in 2012, while all of this was unfolding, she released Anticipation on Ty Scott, her 3rd solo album. The timing was extraordinary. A woman in the middle of the worst public season of her life releasing a gospel album called Anticipation.
Anticipation of you.
The title was an act of defiance dressed as worship. She was still recording. She was still singing. She was still ministering. The stories on social media did not get to define what she did in the studio, and Damita has always been the most herself in the studio. When she finally broke her silence in the summer of 2014 through a tell-all interview with Path magazine publisher Chris Patrick, she did it with the same precision she had brought to her music. She came with a line that has lived in the memory of everyone who heard it. She said that truth with deception is not a whole truth. She said there were inconsistencies in the account Deitrick had given the world, and that those inconsistencies had wounded her during a season when she was already carrying grief she could barely hold. She confirmed that the reconciliation she had believed in was real, that she was operating under the understanding that their problems had been resolved when he left 2 days after her mother's burial. She confirmed that she found out about the pregnancy in December of that same year. She said the 2 years of public accusations and social media shame were hell. She said when the news of the baby arrived, it made that hell hotter. She stopped short of admitting or denying the Isaac Carree allegation, but she gave the room enough to understand her position. She said if 2 people's hands are dirty, it behooves neither of them to throw stones. She said she believed Deitrick had gotten himself into a situation he did not know how to get out of, and that the blame game was how he chose to exit it. She said there were things she chose not to reveal because she still chose to use discretion, not because she had nothing to say, but because dignity had always been her standard, and she was not going to surrender it to match the level of what had been aimed at her. She said the show never reached her emotionally. She said it was TV. She said her attorneys had watched it, so she did not have to. And she moved on. Because the real story of Damita Haddon is not what happened to her. It is what she did after. 12 years before the divorce, she and a man named Reuben Chandler had been connected through ministry at Without Walls International Church in Tampa, Florida. They were friends. Life moved them in different directions. He became a professional photographer, her, a Harlem native, a military veteran, a man who built a quiet life of his own. She built a career in gospel, co-built a ministry, and then survived the collapse of both the marriage and the public narrative around it. When they reconnected, both of them were coming out of divorces. Both of them had lived through their own versions of wreckage. He has said that when he saw her again, he had intentions. She has said she thought he was attractive the moment he walked through the door and immediately wondered if he was single. They took their time. They put all their cards on the table. They talked about everything. They made sure it was not a rebound. And then Reuben Chandler asked her father, Reverend Walter Baz, for his daughter's hand in marriage. On May 3rd, 2014, at Open Word Christian Ministries in Fairburn, Georgia, in the suburbs of Atlanta, Damita Dawn Bass married Reuben Chandler in front of celebrities, industry legends, close friends, and family. The ceremony was officiated by gospel legend and pastor Donnie McClurkin, who stood at the altar barely holding back his tears as he spoke about the woman before him. He told the room that the world had not yet seen the true depth of this amazing woman. He said she was about to embark into another phase of her life and another level of ministry. He told everyone paying attention to pay close attention because God was about to do some amazing things in her life. They called themselves Ramita, a mashup of Reuben and Damita, and the day after the ceremony, they hosted a barbecue for everyone who had come to celebrate them. The new Mrs. Chandler moved to Atlanta with her husband. He said she had never been happier. She meant it. Damita Chandler continues to record, minister, and perform, carrying a voice that gospel music has always known was exceptional and that the wider world is still catching up to. The career that began in a girl group with her twin sister in the early 1990s that built itself quietly through 15 years of co-ministry and Voices of Unity projects and solo albums, and a marriage that the entire gospel world eventually had an opinion about, is still going. She did not become a casualty of someone else's headline. She became a testimony inside her own story. What Damita's account of her own life demands is a reckoning with what it costs a woman in gospel music to carry the wrong quietly, to take the stones without returning them, to watch a version of herself constructed and distributed online, and to respond to all of it by putting out an album called Anticipation, and an interview that said simply this: I choose to use discretion. There are things I will not reveal, and that is not weakness. That is the definition of having nothing left to prove. As of 2026, Damita Chandler's estimated net worth is approximately $1.5 million, built through 3 decades of gospel recording, songwriting, production, ministry, and live performance. The number is less important than what it represents. A woman who stayed in the room after everyone else had decided who she was, kept singing, kept writing, and kept going. If this story moved you, drop your biggest takeaway